Oh, yeah. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're doing well. Tuesday, March 31st. Back with you for probably one last video here before we kick it into spring break. So let's talk housekeeping details before anything else. Number one, I hope you are well. Hope your families are well. I hope nobody that you know has the dreaded corona and that everyone is enjoying whatever sanity and peace you can enjoy in this weird atmosphere of the last few weeks here. Okay. Some school updates in case these are things that you didn't know. You know, we're out until May 5th at least. The school is passing out Chromebooks. You call the school in order to get an appointment for that if you want that. I sent out a message the other day just reminding people that grades do matter during this period. I'm trying to stay on the top of the grading as best as I can. I have about 10 more of the Unit 8 exam writing portions to grade, and then I'll pass them all back. But that should happen sometime later on today, if not this morning. So those should be back to you. Then what's left for you? One more short answer question. Pardon me. One more short answer question that will be put up there probably today and due sometime later on this week. Keep in mind that Friday would have been Fun Fest. That would have been the day of Fun Fest, so I don't expect we'll do a lot of work that day. So really this week, if you watch this video, if you do that short answer question, you are in good shape. And then we'll come back after spring break and we'll get back at it. And probably that'll be, that's 2 weeks from today? Yeah, that's 2 weeks from today. And we will rock and roll with a video about Hitler, and then we'll talk about Stalin, and then we will roll out the rest of this unit and probably do something very similar for an exam again, okay? So let's do this. I have my notes here. Oh, bam. Slides all marked up. I have my slides over here on my laptop ready to roll. I have my study guide in front of me. Now, I have not given you much space here, okay? I have kind of rolled us in a bad way. Today, we're going to talk about a couple of places. We're going to talk about this question here about totalitarianism of the right and the left. There'll be enough space for that. And then we're going to talk about how were Italians disappointed by the Treaty of Versailles. There will be enough space for that. But this right here, Holiday, is criminal, what has occurred right here. What factors helped Mussolini take control in Italian society? That's not enough space. So if I were you, I would relocate that question down to the bottom of page 5, if you like. Plenty of space there. Or I'd put it on the back of the study guide. There's only 5 pages, so there is a blank page at the end. We will also be making our way to this chart here, okay, which in yours has Italy here in the middle. I'll explain why I crossed mine out and why yours looks right. Yours should look right. But Italy's in the middle of the chart, and we'll be filling in that middle column of the chart. But we start, as I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, back here on the second page with what is authoritarian or totalitarian government. Let us go. We're no stranger to rule by one person. If we go back into our memory banks, Louis XIV, Peter the Great, James II, Mary I, all sorts of people with Roman numerals ruled by themselves, and they controlled a society that, generally speaking, had a set of ideals. That is to say, we are Spanish, we are Catholic, that's the way this is going to go. The difference between that system and the one we're about to experience here is a matter of degrees. In other words, when I look at Charles V, let's say, for instance, ruling over Spain, that's a Spain that was, as I said, Catholic. Beyond that, though, Charles is not going to expect much from you as a person as far as your day-to-day ideals and what it is you're doing. That's different in a totalitarian society. When we get to the totalitarian society or the authoritarian society, whichever word you want to use, both are okay, we're going to be looking at a society where one set of ideals governs every thought we have, every action we take. How we go about our daily affairs is absolutely determined by that set of ideals, by one central leader. So under this system we're looking at here of totalitarianism that will take over in places like Italy and Germany, we're looking at a way of controlling people's lives, not just what they think in a grander scale, but down to the minutia. We're going to use things like radio and eventually films, cinema. We're also going to use the newspapers. We're going to use whopping bureaucracies in order to control every aspect, It is total, after all, totalitarian control of your mind and how you go about your daily life. Let's characterize these regimes because we're going to see a lot of them. Okay, we'll take a really close look at three big ones. Mussolini's fascist Italy, then we're going to look at Hitler's Nazi Germany, we will look at Stalin's Soviet Union, and we're also going to have a brief look at the fascist movement that takes off in Spain under Francisco Franco. But the first three, the big three if you like, are all going to share a lot of common traits. Now, did they have these traits beforehand? No. No one sat down at the end of World War I, for instance, and said, I think we're going to need a new type of government, and this new type of government is going to be called totalitarianism. No one said that. They just, over time, cobbled it together, okay? So what is it going to have? Here we go. Number one, control of all aspects of your life. That's something we've already talked about. If you're looking at the slides going, which slide am I on, Holiday? Just to make sure, you're on slide number 13 here, folks. The rise of totalitarian regimes, okay, which started out with control of all aspects of life. That's where you should be. What's our last slide of the day today, Holiday? We will be going to number 19. So 13 to 19 today. Okay. Pardon that aside, but just clarifying things for folks at home. Okay. One-party politics. There's this idea that democracy is ascendant, that it is rising in its importance and rising in its popularity, and that that's a good thing. And we're going to see that challenged. We're going to see regimes like fascist Italy and Nazi Germany be able to transform themselves in ways that are perhaps more efficient than what the democratic states of Europe are going to do. In other words, when I sit down in the middle of the 1930s and I look around, like that, I'm going to be looking at a Britain and a France with democracies that are struggling. And on the other hand, I'm going to be looking at a fascist-controlled Italy and a Nazi Germany where things are going better. And people are going to say, well, maybe one party, one individual ruling is a more efficient way of doing things. Maybe democracy is not best in a moment of crisis. Maybe that's not a good thing. Maybe what I need is strong arm law. Now, the danger of that is the loss of your civil liberties. I was reading an article this morning. Sometimes the news is just like, here, Holiday, use this. It's fantastic. In Serbia, right now, the president of Serbia has really taken martial law control over the country. You've got soldiers patrolling the streets. There's a strict curfew. The borders have been shut. If you're over the 65-year limit, if you like, or cap, you're not supposed to be out of your house. And by not supposed to be, I mean we're going to walk you back in with a gun. It's not going to be like, well, you shouldn't, but if you have to. No, it's here's a gun, get back in your house. It is a strict lockdown of the society in this dangerous epidemic. Now, the downside of that is my civil liberties have been limited. But by the same token, a person arguing in favor of it would say, hey, once in a while you need one person, one central individual who takes over control. And that's what we'll see here in these totalitarian regimes. When we get to fascist Italy here in a moment, it's Benito Mussolini who becomes the symbol of this very strong, powerful government and this movement of Italian people. And instead of a democracy where they talk and they argue and they we don't need that. We need one individual who is able to say, this is the vision of the society, and we are going to get it done that way. So one person from one political party. That's something we'll see in all of these totalitarian examples. Okay? The use of force. Sometimes people get into a mindset of violence and they get desensitized to it. And World War I does that for us. In a sense, World War I tenderizes, horrible word, Holiday, the European mindset, gets us used to a certain level of conflict, physical violence, and force that then becomes acceptable. So in the 1920s and 30s, when I see the rise of these totalitarian movements in various places, they will use violence not out of shame. In other words, for instance, if the leader of the Socialist Party turns up dead over here in Italy, Mussolini is not going to be like, oh, I'm sorry. It's really tragic what happened. Mussolini is going to trumpet the death. Yeah, he's dead. Do we kill him? We might have. But if we did, yeah, that's right, we might have killed him. Okay? We're going to see the embracing of violence. A lot of the early recruits in totalitarian regimes are World War I soldiers who just can't get enough, who didn't get what they wanted out of the war and wanted more. It's important to note that all three of the big leaders we're talking about here, Mussolini, Hitler, Stalin, all fight in the war. All guys who are soldiers without distinction, for that matter. These are not guys who sort of rose through the ranks like, wow, those are military geniuses. They're not. But they're guys who had had a taste of it, and they knew that there were plenty of others who liked the taste of it, right? The early recruits for Mussolini's black shirts for his thug corps are World War I frustrated soldiers. Same when I look over at the Nazis in Germany. Go out and get guys who are just, oh, I want to punch someone, hurt someone, oh, angry. Like, whoa, you, my friend, need some calming music. You need perhaps some goat yoga. Maybe that would do it for you. Or a really nice Thai latte. Tai chi? No, chai latte. That's what I was looking for. Not a Thai latte holiday. That's not a thing. I knew there was a thought there, though. Stay with me, people. Okay. Traditional female roles. By that, I mean home, domestic. Okay. Now, these are countries that, generally speaking, have moved through liberal reform. In other words, if I look at Italy and I look at Germany, those are places where I've got men voting. Briefly, I have women voting in some parts. And you think, man, we're getting there, guys. We're getting there. Fascism imagines women and men doing traditional women and men things. Mussolini and Hitler are going to envision the role of a woman in a home. Now, in both cases, let's put as a slight little caveat, that's a really advantageous thing to say when you don't have a lot of jobs. In other words, in both Italy and Germany, prior to the rise of totalitarian regimes, I see huge unemployment. One of the ways I can tinker with that is I can say, listen, women don't get jobs. Women belong in the home. Go make babies. I'm making a movement. We made this same point when we go all the way back to Martin Luther and John Calvin. If I have a new movement, one of the ways that I spur that new movement is to say, hey, I need you to go make a lot of babies, right? Mussolini, we'll get to this later on, but it's a sweet little detail. Mussolini had a special order, a special prize for women who had 14 children. If you got 14 children, you got a special accolade from Mussolini and you got to meet him. 14. It's a goal. You know, in my brain, I think, holy moly, 14 children. I don't know if meeting Mussolini is worth that, but you put that out there, okay? This last one is enormously important. This is the single most important thing I will say in this entire video. Right here, this is the business. The next 90 seconds are crucial. So take your best brain and get your best brain ready. We're gonna get best brain ready. Okay, here we go. Okay, ready? You've turned off all the distractions. You've put down the earbuds are out. Got this. All right, here we go. There is a difference between totalitarianism of the right and totalitarianism of the left. So in other words, if you put the three big names at a table that I've been talking about so far, Mussolini, Hitler, and Stalin, you would get agreement on everything I've said so far. One ruler, traditional female roles, the use of force, absolutely great. Here's where they divide, okay? Totalitarianism of the right, okay? Now, when you're watching this, in my brain, I'm trying to figure out which side is right. It's still over here, right? Yeah, you're looking at the same video screen I am, okay? So, totalitarianism of the right. Mussolini and Hitler both believe that we are going to create a society that is strongly national. That is to say, it celebrates the Italianness or the Germanness, okay? But we are not going to create international, okay? The totalitarianism of the left over here, the movement that Stalin creates, is an attempt to take all of the workers of the world and unite them into one large classless state. So, in that sense, totalitarianism of the left, international. Totalitarianism of the right, national. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a sec, but let me add to that. Stalin envisions a socialist takeover of the world, right? Keep in mind, they've already had a socialist takeover of Russia to create the Soviet Union. What does that look like? It looks like we are going to take all of the wealth and make a society where there are no classes, a classless cooperation in that sense. That's totalitarianism of the left. Now, on the right-hand side, we are going to create cooperation between the economic classes. The rich, the poor, the worker, the owner, they are going to work together for the greater performance of the state. In other words, I harness all of the social classes over here on the right-hand side, and those individuals work hard to make the nation stronger, the Italian movement, the German movement stronger. On the left, I'm working for international classless cooperation, right? So what's the ideal look like for totalitarianism of the right? It looks like an incredibly robust state, right? Mussolini wants to reinvent the Roman Empire. That's what he wants, a Roman lake made out of the Mediterranean. Big, strong, healthy. Hitler, on the other hand, wants to build this enormous Reich. He wants to build a state of people, perfect people obviously, who are going to push their way into the space to the east of the Germans. More on that down the road, okay? That they have national goals that are based on you still keeping your economic resources. You're a rich person in the right-hand example, no harm, you'll still be rich. You own that factory, pal. You're gonna listen to me when I tell you what to make in that factory. Yes, you are. And we are going to make it, and you're gonna pay your workers a good wage, and you're gonna treat them well, and they will work hard for you. National organization still has classes organized around a powerful center idea of a strong state. On the other hand, on the left, you owned a factory in the old days? Sorry, pal, you don't own a factory anymore. The state of the Soviet Union owns a factory. You might work in that factory, you might not. Okay, we'll see under Stalin that a lot of people who were wealthy before the period began are not just no longer wealthy, they are no longer alive under the Stalinist regime. Okay, so keep in mind, big differences between the right and the left. In the right, it's national, that's my goal. In the left, it's international. On the right, there are still classes. They just all work together for one goal. The government doesn't seize your economic resources. On the left, over here, I'm going to take everything, right? Think about it. We've been talking right and left all year. Same idea here. Conservative values over on the right. The government's going to stay out of taking your goods. Now, we're still going to tell you what to do. Don't forget that. On the left over here, we are absolutely taking everything. You no longer own any of it, okay? Right versus left, big difference. So today, we're talking about one of the movements of the right, Benito Mussolini's fascist Italy, okay? Let's start out with this first slide. This is the slide that says, Italians disappointed at Versailles. Let's get some depth here, okay? The Italians don't do well in World War I. They lose about 650,000 men. You remember their late entrance. They're supposed to be in on the side of the Central Powers. On the side of Germany and Austria-Hungary, they don't. And then they make this behind doors secret treaty with the English in 1915 that says, if we enter the war on your side, you will give us portions of Austria-Hungary when the war is over. So that's the sweetening of the pot. The Italians believe that joining the war and fighting alongside France and England will bring them portions of Austria-Hungary. Because keep in mind what the plan must be then. We're going to break up Austria-Hungary, and we're going to give portions of it to the Italians. And that is going to complete this larger Italian state. Okay, the war ends. We sit down at Versailles, and the Italians are like, pay up. I did what I was supposed to do. Give me my land. And the tone of the meeting, unfortunately, can't do that. This is a meeting of Wilsonian self-determination. Woodrow Wilson's going to say, what agreement? You didn't have a deal. That doesn't count. You can't force Austrian people to live under Italian rule. That goes against the notion of self-determination, man. That doesn't work. So if I'm the Italians, I showed up at Versailles, and I thought I was going to get what I was deserving to get, and I don't get that. The British show up and they get reparations and they get German colonies, and the French show up and they get money and they get a weakened Germany, and they can go home and be like, And Woodrow Wilson thinks he gets the League of Nations. He can go home and brag about that. Now he doesn't get it, but that's beside the point. The Italians are like, what do we get? We didn't even get a free t-shirt out of this thing. We got nothing. So right off the bat, Italians walk out of the settlement of World War One a little bit angry, and rightly so. They don't get what it is they thought they were going to get. Okay, Italy is a mess after World War One. It is a group of people who are trying to deal with the shock and awe of the war and the disappointment, a lot of these frustrated World War I soldiers that I talked about. But it's also economically troubled. It's a society of huge strikes because there are now no longer demands for as many workers, and owners in factories can drive wages down, and workers are going to strike. It is an area where there aren't as many farmers needed, and the peasants are upset at the owners of the land, and they are lashing out, sometimes burning down the manor houses of the owners. They're burning the crops. They're slaughtering the livestock. It's going out of control. And there are some aspects of Italian society who are going to think, what does this look like? Strikes, angry farmers, huge disorder. This looks like what happened in Russia. This looks like what 2 years ago turned the previously imperial, hardcore, conservative Russia into the incredibly liberal, socialist Soviet Union. That's what's happening here. We need to stop that. So when I first start to see Benito Mussolini, Mussolini comes onto the stage as this undecorated, as I said, colonel of World War I. He is a pretty good soldier, but he is in no way an outstanding leader of men. But here's what Mussolini figures out. Number one, there are a lot of angry World War I veterans around. Guys who are ready to do some hurting in order to get their frustrations out. And Mussolini starts to collect those guys together, okay, in groups that are called squadristi, okay, groups that are these angry squads of former World War I soldiers. Number two thing that Mussolini figures out, there's a lot of anti-socialist rhetoric out there. That becomes the rallying cry. Now, early on in his life, Mussolini has some socialist leanings himself, but then he begins to realize that there is a lot of political capital to be made by shaking your fist at the socialist movement. And so Mussolini begins to organize a political movement, fascism, that is organized around anti-socialist ideas. Now, let's make sure we get this clear, because this is exactly where Hitler's going to go. In other words, when you look at the Hitler movement, we come back after Easter, you're going to look at the Hitler movement and go, man, this guy totally plagiarized this business off of Mussolini. And he does. There are aspects that are new for the Hitler side of things, but for the most part, Hitler looks at the Mussolini rise to power and goes, yeah, well, just send me a picture of your stuff, if you will, and yeah, thank you, I appreciate that. That's what's going to happen. And one of the key points is rallying around a group of angry World War I soldiers. Got it. Number two, putting together a coalition of people who would fear socialism. Who is that? Socialism threatens the haves. It threatens to make have-nots out of haves. That's who's worried. If Mussolini's looking for political support, go find it in factory owners, large landowners, industrialists, big military people. Go look for it among the middle class, for whom inflation and socialism would be a nightmare. That's who you go and recruit. So Mussolini's early movement, fascism, is a movement of people who fear socialism and disorder. Now let's play with the name for a minute, fascism. Mussolini uses here a word of the Roman Empire. During the age of Rome, there was a symbol, and it was a literal figurative symbol. Okay? There were two axes, and I'm going to try and make the axes. It looks like axes. That looks like Swan's holiday, but fine. Okay? Two axes tied together with rope, and the fasces represented the power of Rome. In the same way that, you know, a royal person in another state might have the crown or the imperial scepter or the orb or whatever they have, the fasces were the symbol of power and strength of the Roman Empire. That is what Mussolini sells as this movement. His fascism, that word, is used to explain a movement of strong Italian nationalism combined with anti-socialism. In other words, what do we stand for? Here's what we stand for. A larger, stronger Italy. We got hosed at Versailles. We're going to settle that score. We're going to expand out of our region. We're going to expand in other places around the globe. Italy is going to become a major world power again. And we are going to harness the power of this society by squashing this foreign socialist idea. This foreign disease of socialism is going to be crushed by my squads of, eventually he'll go on to call them black shirts, okay? Guys who are his power, his strength. And we're going to have an appreciation, he would say, of violence. Mussolini thought there was a lot to be said for physical strength and vigor in that sense. You ever see videos, a weird side point, but if you see videos of Mussolini, the guy runs a lot. Like he liked to run, not full sprinting, but like a constant military jog, like, okay, boss. But that was one of the ways that he wanted to show strength, okay? Mussolini had a big chin, by the way, whopping. Go look at some photos. You can kind of see it in these ones I have here, but man, the guy had a chin. Stick that chin out there. That's Mussolini for you. Okay. Let's take Mussolini from a guy with an idea to a guy in charge. This is this next slide. Mussolini taking control of Italian society. This is the question I said on the study guide that is probably not going to fit in that space unless you have incredibly tiny handwriting. I know some of you do. But seek out some space, if you will, on the bottom of 5, or if there's space above somewhere here, you could use that. But otherwise, you'll need to find some more space. I apologize for messing that up there. Pardon me. Sip of coffee. All right, here we go. Mussolini is going to capitalize on the disorder in Italy in order to take charge, okay? So Mussolini is a leader of a political movement, the Fascist Party, that is one of several within Italian society. But here's the key. He seems to be the only one who can do anything about this socialist problem. The other parties, the Catholic Party, the kind of liberal democratic party, none of them have to them that'll go out and settle these strikes that are being put on by the socialist movement or get rid of the riots that are happening in the major cities. And so Mussolini's movement, which seems unpalatable on the surface, right? A group of guys who go out and crack skulls. That doesn't seem to attract attention, begins to attract attention because it does what everyone wishes something would do, okay? If I'm this wealthy industrialist, crass as this may sound, and someone brings along a group of guys who breaks a strike by force, there's a small part of me that's like, that's what I needed. Thank you very much. So Mussolini starts to become the darling, in that sense, of a strong anti-socialist movement within Italy, okay? Anti-socialism is the key. It is the absolute key to the rise of Italy and also the Nazis in Germany, right? That is what is going to be absolutely the key of all these things. So you have to understand that what Mussolini puts forward is the idea that I will defend and I will protect what it is that you have earned. That land you have, that pension you have, that home you have, that business, all of those things would go away with socialism. You have to understand, I represent the future if you want to keep those things. That's how Mussolini is going to sell it, and he's brilliant at that. Okay, there are posters of Mussolini, Hitler as well, same theme, that are basically like, Hitler, our last hope. That's pretty out there. But that works when people are desperate, when they're mad about Versailles, when they're worried about socialism, when there's strikes in the street and the farmers are revolting. You just want someone to bring the whole situation together and organize it. And democracy plays a role in it. If I go back to my study guide here, okay? In 1922, the Fascist Party is becoming powerful, but it is not all powerful yet. And Mussolini is able to convince the government to include him as one of the ministers in the government, but not the one running the government. So in other words, Italy, like a lot of European countries, has proportional elections. Okay, so think of this. Think of a House of Representatives, like 435 members. In the Italian model, the 435 members, would be distributed proportionally based on national election results. So in other words, if we win 50% of the popular election, we get 50% of the seats. Or if we win 8% of the election, then we get 8% of the seats. Here's the advantage of that. It allows you some proportional representation of small ideas. In other words, in America, we have two major political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. But there are probably really small sections of the society who would vote for different ideas if a candidate was strong enough to bring those ideas. So for instance, if we divvied up our House of Representatives in the way that Italy works, you could have 8% of the vote for the socialists, and then the socialists would get 8% of 435 members, okay? Or if you had an environmentalist movement that got 15%, then 15% of the representatives in the House would be environmentalists. That's how the Italian chamber worked. Now, what's the downside? It can get really hard to do politics that way. If you have 15 sliver parties all over the place, building a coalition of 50% is hard. And that's one of the problems with democracy in that sense, is that if you had 10 parties that all had representation, it's tough to get a coalition together. That is to say, you have to add up and get 50% and be like, okay, we are the, what's our coalition called? The Conservative Catholic Right-Wing Owl-Loving Party. That gives us 51% over here. Now, but what if one of those little factions says, no, we don't agree, and now we break that coalition? It can be a mess. And Mussolini is going to take advantage of that. How do you take advantage of that? Mussolini gets into this government and says, and by the way here, we're about to hit a new slide, but Mussolini is going to say, I don't know if democracy is the best solution here, but I have an idea. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Let's flip, ladies and gentlemen, in our study guides, okay, to this chart. You flipping? Get there, okay? The middle column is the one for fascist Italy. Why'd I put him in the middle? More on that in a moment, okay? When you look at this, ladies and gentlemen, you have 4 categories, and notice we have 1, 2, 3, 4 slides left, okay? So that should work out. This first one is called creation of a one-party system. So this whole slide here, this one that has 3 bullets on, goes in this middle top center box, the one that starts out with the Acerbo law. So if you're looking at it going, do I have the right one? Yes, you have the right one. As long as when you look at it, and I'm checking to make sure I'm going well here, you have fascist Italy in the middle, you have Stalinist Soviet Russia on the left, and you have Nazi Germany on the right. Why? Because that's how this is going to go. You'll notice the Nazi German movement is far over on the right. Okay, that's the most right-wing of the movements we'll cover. The Italians are right-wing, but they're not as right-wing as the Nazis, so they get the center column. And then my Soviet Russia folk, Stalinist Russia, I should say, they're the far left, so they get the left-hand portion of the column. So today we will fill in that middle column of this chart, and then when we cover Hitler, we'll hit the far right-hand side of the column, and then when we cover Stalin, we'll hit the far left-hand side of the column. So we're in the middle column right now, all right? Creation of a one-party system. Let me go back to my slides just to keep myself on the right spot. Here we go. Mussolini has an idea, this great idea, called the Acerbo law. Here's what we'll do. When we have a real election and everyone gets their little portions of seats, it makes it difficult to govern, but what if? What if one party got all the seats? Mussolini convinces the Italians in this emergency situation to pass a law that will grant 2/3 of the seats in the assembly to whichever party wins the next election. In other words, you don't even have to get a majority. You don't have to get 2/3. Whoever gets the most votes will get 2/3 of the seats. What that means is the moment we win the election, that party will really control Italian politics. Now, in all fairness to Mussolini and his fascists, they win 3/5 of the vote. 60% of the Italian people come out in favor of the fascists. But what Mussolini has done here, and what Hitler will do when we get to him, is use democracy to kill democracy. That is artful. I don't want to sit here and act like I'm admiring it, but you have to, there's a small part of it where you have to go, man, that's some chutzpah. That's some absolute spine to say, we're going to create a system of democracy, and then we're going to use the democracy to destroy the democracy. And that's what the fascists did. They used the Acerbo law and their performance in the election to knock all of the other political parties down as your next point points out, by 1926, they had used the legal democratic system of Italy to ban all opposition parties. How do people go along with that holiday? They go along with it out of fear. And they go along with it out of the idea that Mussolini represents their single lone hope, that they might be able to understand this society and get along. And that this is the only way that they're going to get out of this alive and with their bank account intact, with their business, their home, whatever it is they have. And they put all their trust into Mussolini, okay? Mussolini is able to convince them of that. Now, there is enormous propaganda, and that's a big part of totalitarian rule. The press is going to be big. The radio. It's important that you've heard this person's voice, and you would have known Mussolini's voice. You probably had seen an image of him in the newspaper, perhaps, maybe in public. That's less so than Hitler. Hitler is a much more traveling sort than Mussolini was. But let's put it out there that Mussolini is a possibility in that way. You might have seen him, but you knew his voice. And as a result of that, you associate it with this strong Italian pride. Mussolini was often a man in military garb. He associated the strength of the Italian state with its expansion into other territories, with the strength, the virility in that sense of an Italian society. So you get this really big, dominant feeling of an Italy that is governed by a man who represents all of it. He is us. He's not a king, right? Son of Mussolini is not going to take over after Mussolini, and Mussolini wouldn't want that. Mussolini would want some sort of Nietzschean survival of the fittest battle to take place, right? Mussolini would want an Übermensch who has risen up through the system, and that's exactly what he is. He's a man who has played the moment right, has read the cards, understood what he needed to do. I said to you, ideologically early on, he has a lot of socialist ideas, and then he realizes there's no juice in this. The real way to make this work is in turning the system towards conservatism and turning people against socialism. And so he changes his ideas, turns keel, and says, okay, I think I can make more political storm by hating socialism. And he's right. And that's exactly what Hitler's going to do in Nazi Germany as well. So Mussolini is incredibly good at establishing this one-party system. You know, from this point on, there's really no democracy. It's what Mussolini says. You know, you've got these posters that are laughable, almost sort of like, Mussolini is always right. All right. Now that we've established that, Mussolini is always right. All right. The next one down says the use of force against a common enemy. The black shirts, Mussolini's group of armed, angry men, go out and do the business of the state. Now, there's not nearly as much violence in Italy as there will be in Nazi Germany. Part of that is because Mussolini doesn't have a strong kind of biological racist tone like we'll get to with Nazi Germany. But Mussolini does think that there's a place for violence, especially against socialists, right? Probably the best example of it, and I wrote the name down so I didn't mispronounce it, Giacomo Matteotti, okay, who is the leader of the socialist movement in Italy, who is found dead. And Mussolini's black shirts are blamed for the crime. It's something that Mussolini is going to be very cagey about. He's not going to admit to it, but at the same time, he's not going to deny it. People like that the socialist leader is dead. They like that this happened. Mussolini doesn't need to sort of push away any sort of accusations. He feels justified in having done this, okay? The next one is the control of the economy. Now, this is a little bit confusing, so I will do my best and you will do your best, but here's what Mussolini has in mind, a system that he calls corporatism. Okay? Corporatism is the gathering together of all of the good of the economy into a government-led bureaucracy that runs the economy. So let me map this out. We're going to split the economy into 22 economic regions, each of which is going to have representatives from ownership, those who own, and labor, those who work. And we are going to negotiate conditions, prices, output, wages for workers, how we are going to make things, what we are going to make, and that's all going to be organized by the government. So Mussolini imagines every single Italian working, males that is, for the cause that is the betterment of Italy, but doing so under an umbrella and a strong handhold of the government of Italy. You are going to do what we ask you to do, and if you do so, you're going to be prosperous. That's the key here. So Italians are going to see on their surface here a job and a reasonable wage and prices that are understandable. Now, what might I not get? I might not get all the things I want in life. World War I total warfare is a great transitional piece into the way this economy is going to work. There are certain things we're going to make, and there are certain things we're not going to make. And if you wanted one of those things we're not making, then unfortunately that's just how it is. We're going to make the things that make this Italian fascist state great. Primarily, we're going to focus on production for the military and for industrialization. That's what Italy needs in order to be stronger, greater, broader in Mussolini's eyes, and that's what we're going to make. So you as a human being will be counted upon to be a good laborer. Do not go on strike. Okay, that's what we're trying to avoid. Strikes remind us of that crazy time before Mussolini. Your labor leaders have negotiated your wage. Your wage is good. Owners don't take advantage of your workers. You have gotten a good profit out of this. You're allowed to keep your profit. This is a right-wing totalitarian regime. We don't want to steal your resources. We want to direct them in the right way towards a corporate, this is the idea, right, corporatism, towards a corporate whole that is organically working for the greater good of a common Italy, okay? Not stealing the work of workers, not stealing profits from owners. Everyone's going to get their fair share. Does it work? Well, let's put it this way. When the Great Depression hits in 29 and starts to ripple its way across Europe, one of the countries that's less affected, not affected, but less affected are the Italians. And Mussolini could say to you, well, that's because we have a system of organization that anticipates problems, and we've done a great job of government control here. Okay. All right, the role of women in the family. I said earlier that if you are an Italian woman and you have 14 kids, Mussolini wants to meet you. Yeah. Okay, now, that means, though, a very traditional set of ideals for women. Stay at home, have babies, raise those children. Mussolini imagines young men and young women in what today would translate into a cross between the military and the Boy Scouts of America and perhaps the Girl Scouts of America. Okay, sort of the right diligence and virtues in those organizations. The male equivalent, for instance, in Italy was called the Order of the Wolf. Great. Or what was the phrase I was going to use? Oh, yeah, Mussolini has this wonderful quote that every young Italian boy should carry at all times two things, a book and a musket. You should be ready to go. Your brain should be ready, and you should be ready to fight on behalf of the Italian people, right? Because keep in mind what you're preaching, if you're Mussolini, is this next era when we as an Italian state expand. Now, if you're looking at Italy where it is in Europe and saying, expand to where? Well, expand into that territory that is in Austria to the north, expand across the Adriatic Sea to our east and take the territory that's part of the Slavic territory. The Italians overwhelm Ethiopia under Mussolini's reign in the 1930s and have big designs on Africa. Now, one of the things that's going to check that is that Mussolini's fascist brother in the north, Adolf Hitler, is going to come along with his own aspirations. So in case Mussolini had plans for kind of a pan-European African thing, Hitler has his own designs and is, for that matter, stronger than Mussolini is going to be. So that's going to put a damper on those things. But as far as the home goes, man in charge, woman at home, a ton of kids. I've got a picture here with Mussolini with his children. Now, Mussolini also had several mistresses going on the side, so this whole have a good family, I don't know, Mussolini seems a little hypocritical if you look at the whole picture of things, okay? That, ladies and gentlemen, is our coverage of totalitarian regimes and also of Mussolini. Make sure that we have filled in then what's our obligation, Holiday. Our obligation is when I look at my study guide, I should have it filled in until it says Germany on the middle of the second page. And then when I flip over to the third page, the middle column of the chart should be full. And then that would be my sign that I'm good. As I said, later on today, today's Tuesday, I'm going to post a short answer question that will be due later in the week. please get to that sometime this week, and I'll put a due date on there that's basically, I think, Friday afternoon. You'll have plenty of time. And take care of yourselves. Be well. Most people turning in work, getting it turned around, no problems at all. If you have anything going on where you need my assistance, I hope you'll reach out. Otherwise, enjoy the weather. Enjoy your families. Take care of yourselves.